My cheating wife asked for an open marriage, so I made her regret it with the ultimate revenge plan. My wife of 10 years, Rose, greeted me as I walked through the door after work on Wednesday night. She asked me to sit at the table because we needed to talk about something serious. I thought to myself, "Wow, this sounds like the start of many difficult conversations." As I took my seat, she began by stating that she was confident I knew she loved me and would never harm our marriage. Her words made me feel uneasy. I replied, "'T'okay." But before I could continue, she interrupted and took a deep breath. I knew this conversation was about to take a bad turn. She continued, "I love you and want us to grow old together, but I have made a decision. I want to have an affair." This revelation completely caught me off guard, and it didn't sit well with me. I attempted to clarify, "So, let's get this straight. You love me, you don't want to harm our relationship, but you do want to be close to someone else?" I inquired, somewhat crudely. She responded, "I wouldn't put it quite like that. I've met someone I'd like to have a physical relationship with. It would only happen on occasion, and I promise to always be open and honest with you. I believe I love you enough that this will not affect my feelings for you. If you truly love me, as you claim, you should let me do this because I feel compelled to." She smiled confidently as she explained. Confused and surprised, I responded, "I don't understand why you believe you have to do this, and I can't understand how it wouldn't affect us. Have you made plans with this person yet?" Rose nodded. "We're tentatively planning to go away for a weekend next week." She then asked me a question and urged me to be honest. She wanted to know how I would react if she proposed the same thing to me. I knew a truthful response would make her explode because the idea was so surprising. I replied, "I would be fine with it, as long as you assured me that it would not harm our relationship." She stated, "You know damn well you would have flipped out if I had brought up such a thing." I scoffed at her comment, and she looked surprised, responding, "I honestly did not expect you to react like this. I thought your love for me would allow me to do something so important." I responded, "Well, whatever you've been smoking, it must be illegal. Did you really think I just gave you permission to be with this guy? So, I'm supposed to sit at home and do nothing while you go out for the weekend?" "Maybe I didn't think things through properly," she admitted. "You're correct. I didn't consider many factors, including my own feelings." I asked, "If I say no, will you still go ahead with it?" She replied, "I honestly don't know. I never expected you to refuse me." I said, "We didn't think this through very well. This is what we'll do. Give me a few days to think about this. Let's sit down Sunday afternoon, and we'll talk about it after I've had some time to reflect." That night took me by surprise, and feeling uneasy, I went into our bedroom and started relocating my belongings to the guest room. She inquired about what I was doing. I explained that I preferred not to share a bed with her because she appeared to be more interested in someone else than me. I closed the door firmly after entering the guest room. The night was not particularly restful, but I did make a plan. It occurred to me that if she carried out her intentions, our relationship would be irreparably damaged. The next day, I left for work as usual but didn't speak with Rose. I called my office and explained that I needed the next 2 days for personal reasons. Then I set to work on my strategy. I bought 3 voice-activated recorders and placed one near the phone, one in our bedroom, and one in her car. I even found a phone tape recorder that connected to our landline. My next destination was the cell phone provider. Since my name was on our phone plan, I was able to obtain a copy of her phone charges. Later, while she was still at work, I decided to look into her email accounts. I discovered one I hadn't known about, but the password was simple. What I discovered there was quite revealing, but at least I learned she hadn't been physically involved with him yet. To wrap up my day, I set up the account to forward any emails to me without leaving a trace. I got my hands on a set of discrete GPS locators. These small gadgets were easy to conceal. I intended to slip one into her wallet, where she would most likely keep her cash and credit cards, and the other into her car. It had been a hectic day, but I had everything set up to keep track of her. The only thing missing was access to her cell phone to check for messages. I hoped to do that later that evening, along with planting the GPS devices. I checked her emails and discovered that she had exchanged several messages with a coworker named Frank Jones. Frank was in the middle of it all, and I was ready to turn his world upside down, just like he had mine. The emails confirmed that the upcoming weekend was a go, regardless of what I said. That Friday, I went to see a divorce lawyer who came highly recommended. I told him to begin the divorce proceedings with adultery as the cause, naming Frank Jones as the man I planned to sue. The lawyer assured me that the case would be straightforward with proper evidence. I showed him all the emails and phone records, and I mentioned that I would soon have audio tapes as well. He appeared pleased and determined to begin the proceedings immediately. When Rose returned home that evening, I ignored her and remained silent as she prepared dinner. I left the house and went to a bar to eat and drink a few beers. When I returned, she attempted to speak to me, but I simply walked past her, entered the guest room, and slammed the door shut. Her only chance to save our marriage was to cancel her plans with Frank, but I wasn't optimistic about it happening. I continued to ignore her all weekend until Sunday afternoon, when I decided it was time to talk. We both took seats in the kitchen, and I began by expressing my dissatisfaction with her request. I explained that I had given it a lot of thought and couldn't come to terms with it. I pointed out that, despite her claims that it would have no effect on our marriage, it was clear that it was already causing problems. I noticed her upset demeanor and suggested that if she had looked at things from my perspective, she might have been more understanding. I mentioned my attempts to see from her perspective, but I didn't see any positive results. As a result, I had to decline her request. "How can you be so selfish when you love me?" she asked. I replied, "If anyone here is selfish, it appears to be you wanting to be with someone else." She countered, "What happens if I go ahead with it anyway?" I warned, "There will be serious consequences for any extramarital relations. 10 years ago, we both made vows to be faithful." She responded, "I understand, but this is something I need to do." I concluded, "Well, I suppose this discussion is over. You really should think about this." I got up and left the house, taking my laptop to a Wi-Fi hotspot to monitor their emails. She was furious and assured him that she would leave regardless. He told her it was great because he had already reserved room 125 at the Hilton in Kansas City for Friday and Saturday nights. I immediately reserved the room for Thursday night. They were making it too easy. They also had a romantic date planned for Saturday evening, which included dinner, dancing, and closeness. Rose mentioned that she bought new underwear specifically for their date. I grabbed a bite to eat and kept an eye on their correspondence. They had moved past my refusal and were deep into planning their weekend. The check-in time was 3 o'clock, so he planned to pick her up at 1 o'clock. They wanted to arrive as soon as possible, given the 2-hour drive. I was surprised he was going to pick her up at home. I needed to decide what I wanted to do about that. I also reserved a weekend room close enough to theirs to intercept all their signals. For the next few days, I gathered all the required equipment, including a couple of small fiber-optic HD video cameras. I intended to install them in the room on Thursday to be fully prepared to document their weekend adventures. This evidence would be ideal for my divorce proceedings. I ignored her the entire time, but Wednesday was her day of reckoning. I decided to give her one final chance. If she chose Frank, that would mean the end for us. I invited her to join me at the table for a moment. She did not seem thrilled, but complied. I started the conversation by asking if she had given it much thought. She confirmed that she had and expressed her intention to carry out her plan. She mentioned her upcoming trip with Frank and hoped that we could get past this. I let out a sigh and warned her that this was her final chance to reconsider. I advised her not to jeopardize our marriage for someone else and warned her about the consequences if she did. Despite my warning, she stood firm on her decision. I concluded by saying she had chosen Frank over me. I then left the room, closing the door firmly, as I usually did, indicating the finality of her decision. It was clear that our marriage had ended, and someone would have to face the consequences. Thursday morning, I went to work and asked for the afternoon and the following day off to finalize my divorce plans with Rose. My boss was sympathetic and offered his support, giving me the time I required. On Thursday, I drove to Kansas City, checked into their room, and set up all the surveillance devices to ensure they were working properly. I wanted to gather all the evidence needed for the divorce proceedings. Then, on my laptop, I confirmed that all the cameras were operational and aimed correctly. I waited for them to turn off before moving around to ensure they would activate. Everything seemed fine. I walked down the hall past their room to ensure I had enough range for monitoring. Once again, it was within reach. When I returned home, I considered ending my marriage. I had one more errand to complete. I went to a gun store and purchased a small can of pepper spray to disrupt their romantic date. When I arrived home, Rose was waiting in the kitchen, looking expectantly at me. I walked past her without speaking and slammed my door once more. Rose came into my room, attempting to be friendly, but I told her to save it for Frank because I didn't need any sympathy. I turned away from her, and she left. I slept restlessly that night, but everything was set to end on Friday morning. I got up and left at the usual time without saying anything to her. I visited the lawyer's office and signed the divorce papers. I informed them that I would have all the required evidence by Monday and asked that she be served with the papers at her workplace on Monday afternoon. I also requested that they serve papers on Frank at the same time, as I intended to sue him for alienation of affection. Rose's GPS indicated she was at the hair salon. I entered the house and opened her suitcase, where I discovered her new underwear. They were undeniably attractive, however, it was unfortunate she wasn't doing this for me. Wearing rubber gloves, I took out her new laundry and sprayed pepper spray on the crotch of her panties and the cups of her bra before returning them to the suitcase. It was going to be interesting. I went to the bank and closed all our joint accounts, transferring all the funds to a new account. I also canceled the credit cards in both our names. With a successful morning's work behind me, around 12:30, I headed home to say goodbye to my wife. I knew she was preparing for her new man. I entered the house, and Rose was nowhere to be seen, so I assumed she was upstairs getting ready. I went up to her room and walked in, finding her wearing some underwear I had previously gifted her. She attempted to cover herself, but I told her not to be silly because I had seen it all before. She looked stunning with her new hairstyle, flawless makeup, and alluring lingerie. I couldn't resist telling her how beautiful she looked that day. I expressed my disappointment that she did not make such an effort for me. She responded by explaining that she simply wanted to feel good about herself that day. I continued, "You look alluring, but I have the impression you're more concerned with what others think of you than you have ever been with me." In response, she apologized, saying she just wanted to feel attractive. I sighed and reminded her how attractive she had always been to me. I emphasized the depth of my love for her and that I believe she loved me as well. I approached her and gently removed the rings from her left hand. I went on to explain that the ring I gave her on our wedding day had special meaning for me because it symbolized our vow to forsake all others. I expressed my disappointment that it appeared to have less meaning for her. I mentioned that I did not want to see the ring I gave her on her finger while she was with another man. I also mentioned that the engagement ring was my mother's, and I planned to keep it for sentimental reasons. I slipped both rings into my pocket, and she looked surprised but did not protest. "I won't be present when he arrives, but I don't want him in my house. You can't be with him here. If you do, I will take serious action against him and ensure that you will never be desirable to a man again. I promise he will not be allowed to enter my home." "Are you getting it?" She replied, "Yes, I will not let him in." I said, "That is good. I will be keeping an eye on things." She asked, "Why are you behaving like this?" I responded, "Because the love of my life has shattered that love. I'm hoping this weekend is worth the consequences. Goodbye, Rose." I turned and walked away from my soon-to-be ex-wife. She yelled at me as I left, but I was finished with her. I parked down the street so that Rose could see me. If he entered the house, I'd risk imprisonment, but they'd suffer more. Soon, his car arrived. He walked to the door and rang the doorbell. Rose opened the door and exited with her suitcase. She set it down and hugged him, followed by a long, passionate kiss. As he picked up her suitcase, she looked at me with a smug grin. She sat beside him in the car and gave me another smug look as they drove past. I responded by flipping her off, wiping that smug expression off her face. When I returned home, I changed all the locks and the garage door code. I had already packed my suitcase, so I grabbed it and went to Kansas City. After checking in, I went to my room to set up my laptop. Rose made a move, indicating they had already been intimate. As the camera focused on the foot of the bed, it was clear that he had not lasted long. He emerged from the bathroom completely naked. I couldn't help but laugh, given that he was holding a very small tool. Rose was accustomed to far more than what this guy could provide. At that point, Frank joined Rose on the bed, clearly ready for another round. She smiled at him and extended her arms. I couldn't help but laugh as she reached for his tiny tool. He didn't have to hold back because I doubt she could feel that small thing inside her. Wow, did she make a terrible decision? This guy was completely pitiful. I noticed a hint of frustration on her face as he took a break. It appeared that she was not going to be pleased with the outcome of the weekend. She would return home frustrated and be kicked out the next day. He was soon ready for another round, and he gave her another underwhelming 4-minute session. He'd already finished 3 times, and she wasn't even close. This was turning out better than I had hoped. I had to stop watching and go out for dinner and drinks. I left everything recorded so that I could gather all the evidence I might need for the lawyer and make it abundantly clear to her what a poor decision she had made. When I returned, he was fast asleep, and she seemed even more frustrated. This was actually quite enjoyable. When I got over the grief of losing my wife, I went to bed thinking about how much fun I'd have messing with him tomorrow. I thought about some of the attractive women I'd seen at the bar and realized I'd soon be free to pursue them. I fell asleep with a contented smile on my face. There was no more pain for me. My path was set, and I knew where I was going. I awoke feeling refreshed and ready to have some fun. After a shower, I went out for a nice breakfast and grabbed some snacks in case I couldn't leave. After returning to my room, I called a local florist. I ordered a bouquet for Rose, similar to the ones I used to give her on our anniversary. I wanted her to think about what she was putting at risk because there would be no more anniversaries. I requested that it be delivered at 11 o'clock in the morning. My timing may have been good, but it didn't really matter. The timing proved to be perfect. They left the room for a while and then resumed their romantic activities. They were soon naked, and he had only begun when there was a knock on the door. The florist delivered the flowers, and Rose's face was contemplative before quickly turning angry. She picked up her cell phone and dialed a number. My cell phone began to ring and I answered it, which led to a brief conversation. "Hello, and how are you?" I asked. She replied, "Not great. My wife is out with another guy while I'm here, and I'm getting angrier by the minute." I responded, "Why do you care? I received a bouquet of flowers just like the ones you always give me on our anniversary. I was curious what you were up to." I said, "I'm not sure how you could think I did that. First and foremost, you and your brilliant boyfriend kept me in the dark about your plans. Second, if I had sent you flowers, they would have been ragweed, and the card would have addressed my cheating wife. Not very nice, is it? But then again, neither is your brief encounter with Frankie. Perhaps the flowers will give you an idea of what you're throwing away." I noticed a surprised expression on her face as I turned off my phone. She immediately tried calling again, but I didn't respond. She tried several more times before giving up. She told Frankie what I'd said, and he assured her that I'd get over it. However, that wouldn't happen until I got rid of her. She wasn't in the mood for closeness at first, but she gradually gave in. So, I decided to order pizza delivery and chose Rose's favorite pizza. The pizza arrived just as he was getting back into the game. Frankie was upset and refused to pay, but the delivery person confirmed the room number and his phone number. He even threatened to contact the police. Frankie reluctantly paid up. Because they had paid for it, they decided to eat their lunch. After finishing their meal, they talked for a while, but Frankie's hormones got the best of him, and he pursued her again. Just as things were heating up, I called the sandwich shop and requested her favorite sandwich for delivery. About a minute into their intimate time, the sandwich arrived. When Rose saw the sandwich, she assumed I had discovered their location. He could not believe it, but she spilled the beans about my sarcastic remark, claiming that I had most likely hacked into her new email and mentioned it there. It took her some time, but she finally realized what was going on. She said I was quite clever and would not have had much trouble doing so. They decided to get dressed and go out for a while, intending to return, freshen up, and prepare for their romantic date. She later assured him that she would make it up to him tonight. Before they left, I couldn't stop laughing. I was in tears. When they returned, they showered and dressed, with Rose putting on some lingerie and giving him a little show. He attempted to make a move, but she insisted on going out for a date. I was wondering how long it would take for my little surprise to kick in. She finished getting dressed and looked great. I hoped my plan would work because it would make for an interesting spectacle. They left, and I settled in, looking forward to their return. They returned about an hour later, and Rose dashed into the bathroom to take a shower. She stayed in there for a while, and when she came out, her breasts and crotch were bright red. They appeared to be in pain, and it seemed that little Frankie was also not getting any action that night. Rose was crying on the bed when Frankie attempted to get frisky. She went off on him, saying she was in pain and wasn't interested right now. She chalked it up to an allergic reaction to her new lingerie. Little did she know. I spent some time organizing my videos and creating DVDs for both my lawyer and Frankie's wife. Once everything was ready, I called it a night. It had been an extremely successful day, and I couldn't help but smile. Trouble was brewing in paradise, and I was the source of it. Sunday morning I got up and went home. Rose was in for a lot of trouble when she returned, but tomorrow everything would be over. Later that day, Frankie dropped her off without even walking her to the door. He just let her leave. I was sitting on the couch, engrossed in a football game, and didn't notice her arrival. She announced that she was home, and I barely responded. She walked right in front of the TV, flashing me a sultry smile, and said she thought I'd be glad to see her, given that she was not dead. I responded by asking what had given her that impression, and whether she thought I had suddenly become foolish. She responded, stating that she did not think I was foolish, but rather that my love for her was strong enough to overcome the circumstances. I retorted by saying that while I had once loved her wholeheartedly, that had changed after she left with someone else despite my pleas. I expressed that I had poured my heart out to her, only to have it mean nothing. I admitted that once she left with him, I no longer cared whether she would return. She appeared taken aback by my feelings and stated that she couldn't believe I felt that way about her. I responded firmly, confirming that this was the case and emphasizing that she had made a significant error. She then asked if there was any chance we could move forward, promising to do anything to make things right. I responded with a sarcastic remark, suggesting she get down on her knees and apologize. She protested, saying she couldn't do it. I sided with her and admitted that I knew she wouldn't, which only strengthened my doubts about the value of her promises to save our marriage, much like her pledge of fidelity when we got married. She told me she had been thinking about me all day and wanted to make love that evening. I responded coldly, "You need me? I don't think so." "Making love tonight? Not likely. Did you have little Frankie use protection whenever you were with him?" She said, "No, he's married, but I can't have children." I continued, "Do you think you're the only one he's gotten rid of? Are you damaged goods now? As far as I'm concerned, I will not touch you until you have received a clean bill of health from a doctor." Also, I don't do seconds. She snapped back. Right, I'm going to use a rubber to sleep with my wife after she spent the weekend with some loser. Screw you, I replied. You chose little Frankie over me. I'm going out for a while. I can't bear looking at your cheating ass tonight. You can sleep in the guest room. I prefer the master bedroom. Unlike you, I didn't do anything wrong. I responded firmly. We can discuss this tomorrow when you return from work. She said, I'm not sure what else there is to discuss. I left the house and went to a nearby bar and grill to eat dinner and clear my mind. My mind was already clear because I knew exactly what I was doing. I simply needed some distance from her. I don't drink much, so I had a meal and went for a long walk. When I got home, she was in my bed. I gave her a stern look and told her to leave my bed. She argued, claiming, this is our bed. I have the same right to be here as you do. I replied, the hell you do. You gave up on that when you became involved with little Frankie. So get out of my bed or I'll take your belongings and throw you out on the street. She began crying and slowly exited the room, and I made sure to close and lock the door behind her. Her tears were still audible as she walked down the corridor. The following morning, I completely ignored her. We both had breakfast, and she left at her usual time. As she turned to go, she said she loved me. I gave her a cold, scornful look and replied that I had loved her too, emphasizing that it was in the past tense. I saw tears well up in her eyes as she turned and walked away. Once she was gone, I started packing her belongings into garbage bags. Then I contacted Frankie's wife, Rose. I asked if she was aware that her husband had spent the weekend with my wife. She assumed he'd been away on business, so when I offered to provide her with copies of my evidence, she was very interested. I was surprised when she opened the door. She looked absolutely stunning. I stammered and had to apologize to her, blaming my initial shock on her beauty, which was completely accurate. We got down to business, and I explained what happened over the weekend. Rose was furious, so we agreed that she would accompany me to the lawyer's office to see if he would take her case. The attorney agreed to represent her and even offered us a discount. Rose began completing the necessary paperwork while I spoke with the attorney. I asked him if I needed to wait to serve Frankie to protect Rose, and he assured me that as long as she signed the papers first, she would be fine. Rose and I went out to lunch while they prepared her divorce papers. After she signed them, I dropped her off at home and returned to await Rose's call. I was supposed to call her that night to tell her how things went. My phone rang around 3 o'clock, and she sounded quite upset. She asked, "What the hell is this?" I was just served with divorce papers, and Frank received some papers about being sued for something. I responded, "Well, everything seems pretty straightforward to me. I warned you that there would be consequences to your weekend. You don't seem to have taken me seriously." She replied, "I didn't think you'd actually go through with this." I shot back, "Maybe you should have listened to me instead of believing everything little Frankie told you. Let's not discuss this over the phone. We can talk when you return to my place." Then I hung up. I put her belongings in garbage bags and tossed them into the front yard, knowing that I was filming the confrontation. It could be useful for obtaining a restraining order against her if necessary. When she pulled into the driveway and saw her belongings strewn about, she became enraged. She was screaming incoherently, and spit was flying from her mouth as she vented her rage. I remained calm as she vented, eventually breaking in to start our final conversation. "And if you want to talk, you should sit down so that we can have a civil conversation. If not, I'll load your belongings into your car, and you can leave." She sobbed. "I never imagined you'd do this to me." I replied firmly, "Do this to you? You foolish woman, you did this to us. I warned you several times not to do it and even begged you not to destroy our marriage, but you chose to do exactly that. So, why would you believe I wouldn't file for divorce?" "You said you loved me," she whimpered. I admitted, "I loved you more than anything, but you broke my heart in return. The problem was that you did not love or respect me. I can't live with someone who thinks so little of me, even though I still care about you." She asked, "Why are you calling him little Frankie?" I responded, "I had video cameras set up in your room to capture everything that happened over the weekend. You can understand why I call him little. The first time I saw his underwhelming package, I couldn't help but cry with laughter. I even wondered if you could feel anything from that. I also noticed that you weren't having as much fun as you usually did when we were close." She responded, "We truly made love, and I will probably miss it." I provided a different perspective. "Consider it this way, you now have the freedom to be with whomever you choose. You can have a different partner every night." She shook her head and stated, "I don't want that. I want you, only you." I suggested we go inside and take a seat for a few minutes. I apologized for my harsh words, saying, "I'm currently dealing with a lot of anger, but please understand that I would never physically harm someone." The same cannot be said of little Frankie. We went inside and sat down at the kitchen table, as we had done many times before. It hit me hard when I realized that this would be our last time sitting together like this. She asked, "You wouldn't really hurt Frank, would you?" I replied firmly, "Why not? He destroyed our once happy marriage. I believe he should pay more than just for the lawsuit and divorce." He will not be getting divorced, by the way. His wife understood the situation and agreed to let him do it. She expressed doubt. "Do you really believe it, or is it a ruse to make me appear bad so he can be with you?" I told her. I spoke with his wife this morning and shared my evidence with her. He told her he was away on business. They now share a lawyer, and we even received a discount. She reflected, "I wish you had been honest." I asked, "How would you react if I wanted to be with another man? You'd have gone crazy." I argued. He knew his wife would never agree to it. "I doubt you believe me even now, and that is one of the reasons we are getting divorced. But truthfully, I don't care what you believe. When you call him later, you'll discover that he has also been shown the door." She asked, "So, you're actually kicking me out?" I confirmed, "Yes, I am." The night you revealed your plan, I went into the guest room to reflect. Within an hour, I knew I wanted to get divorced. On Thursday, I purchased the equipment required to collect evidence and hacked into your email account. Then, on Friday, I went to the lawyer and started the divorce process. She asked, "Why didn't you tell me about your plans to divorce me? I might have reconsidered. Is there any chance you'd forgive me?" I replied, "Rose, I loved you so much that forgiveness could have been possible. However, you squandered your final opportunity last night. I think I could forgive you, but I'd never trust you again. I would spend every day wondering when you would want to be with someone else, and I can't live like that. It's best if we end it now." She couldn't hold back her tears. I said, "Unlike you, I've thought about this thoroughly, but every time I came to the same conclusion. I'm going to divorce you and make little Frankie pay for destroying my marriage. You can call him before you leave if you want to share a place or something. Just don't try to use your credit card. I have canceled them all. I left half of our checking account balance for you, but I removed my name from it. I will split our savings with you. You can keep your car, but you will have to handle the payments. You can take all your clothes and personal items. Once you find a place to live, you can have as much furniture as you want, but the house is mine. If I decide to sell it, I'll split the proceeds with you. It's all laid out in the divorce papers. If you choose to contest it, I'll use all the evidence I have, and it won't end well for you. I don't want to go down that road, but I will if necessary." She replied, "I won't fight it. This is all my fault. I just wish I could undo it." I lightened the mood. "Well, do you know the difference between a cheating wife and a light bulb?" Confused, she asked, "No, what's the difference?" I said, "You can't have a romantic relationship with a light bulb." She didn't find it amusing at all. I informed her that it was time for her to leave and escorted her out of my house. While she tearfully observed, I loaded all her belongings into her car. Once everything was packed, I opened her car door and handed her one last item, her wedding ring, which I had flattened with a hammer. I told her it was now just scrap gold that she could sell for a decent price. After closing her car door, I leaned in and kissed her on the forehead, uttering my final words to her. "Goodbye, my love." I then turned and walked back to my lonely house. I didn't even watch her drive away. I couldn't, as my eyes were filled with tears, and I cried for another hour until I was emotionally drained. Now it was time to consider my options. As I saw it, I had 3 choices. First, I could drown my sorrows in alcohol and drink myself into oblivion. However, I hardly drink and dislike the aftermath of heavy drinking, so that wasn't a viable option. Second, I could end my life and supposedly make everyone happy, but I refused to give her the satisfaction of achieving that. Third, I could stand tall, knowing I had done nothing wrong, and move forward with my life. The silver lining was the absence of rosé, which brought a smile to my face. I straightened up and, still smiling, dialed Rose's number. We made plans for dinner that evening, and I realized I was on the path to healing. As I stood upright and continued to smile, I called Rose's number once more. We arranged to meet for dinner that evening, and I sensed that I was on my way to recovery. Perhaps we'd end up as friends. Or maybe I'd find someone new because the image of her still lingered in my mind. Thank you for listening to the story today. Please like and subscribe if you like what you hear. Please leave a comment to share your thoughts on what happened. Please do not hesitate to contact me if you have a story to tell about your or another person's situation. Take care.